The fluorescent lights of Apex Capital Management's 42nd floor cast their sterile glow across rows of mahogany desks and glass partitions. Outside, Manhattan sprawled beneath the darkening November sky, its million windows beginning to glow like embers scattered across black velvet. Inside, the hum of ambition never stopped. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, voices rising and falling in the language of profit and loss. Victoria Ashford stood at her corner office window, arms crossed, watching the city she'd conquered through sheer will and brilliant strategy. But her attention wasn't on the skyline tonight. Through the glass partition she could see him. Ezra Hartwell sat at his desk in the southeast corner, fingers moving across his keyboard with the practiced efficiency of a man who had done this exact thing in this exact way for years. His workspace was immaculate. No photos, no plants, no coffee-stained mugs with inspirational quotes, just 3 monitors displaying cascading columns of numbers, a single notepad with his precise handwriting, and a small analog clock, the kind with actual hands that ticked audibly in the silence. Victoria's eyes flicked to that clock. 5:23. She'd been watching long enough to know what came next. Right on schedule. Ezra saved his work with quick keystrokes, closed each window methodically, and reached for the blazer draped over his chair. Victoria felt something twist in her chest. Frustration, maybe, or something more dangerous. Curiosity sharpened by months of rejection. Julian Cross called from 2 desks over, his tone playful, but edged with something sharper. "Leaving already, Hartwell? Big Friday night plans?" Ezra slipped his arms into the blazer without looking up. "Same as always, Julian. That's what worries us. You're making the rest of us look bad. Some of us actually have lives to avoid." A few scattered chuckles rippled through the nearby desks. Ezra offered a thin smile, polite, practiced, and utterly empty of real warmth. "Have a good weekend." 5:25. He moved toward the elevator with the same unhurried pace he always did, neither rushing nor dawdling. His shoes made soft sounds against the polished floor. Around him the office was in that strange twilight state. Half the desks already abandoned, the other half occupied by people who'd be there until midnight, either by choice or desperation. Victoria made her decision. She stepped out of her office, heels clicking against the marble with metronomic precision. "Ezra!" He stopped mid-step. Not loud, not harsh, but absolute. He turned slowly. Victoria stood 15 feet away, hands clasped loosely in front of her head, tilted slightly as if examining a particularly interesting piece of art. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her dark hair pulled back in a style that was both severe and elegant. Her eyes, sharp, intelligent, relentlessly focused, fixed on him with an intensity that had made seasoned executives stumble over their presentations. "Ms. Ashford, I didn't see you there." "I noticed." She took 3 measured steps toward him. "Do you have a moment?" Ezra's eyes flicked to the clock on the wall behind her. 5:26. "I'm just heading out. Perhaps we could speak Monday morning. I can come in early." "This won't take long." Her tone wasn't unkind, but it left no room for negotiation. "Walk with me." It wasn't really a question. Ezra's fingers tightened on his bag strap, but his face remained carefully composed. "Of course." Victoria turned and began walking toward her corner office. Ezra fell into step beside her, acutely aware of the eyes tracking them. Subtle glances from colleagues who'd learned to read the office's power dynamics like weather patterns. They passed through the main floor where junior analysts hunched over spreadsheets like monks over illuminated manuscripts. They passed the glass-walled conference rooms, empty now except for forgotten coffee cups and whiteboard ghosts of meetings past. They passed the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city Ezra never stopped to admire. Victoria's office occupied the northwest corner, a space of clean lines and expensive minimalism. She gestured to one of the 2 chairs facing her desk. "Please sit." "Ms. Ashford, I really do need to—" "Sit, Ezra." He sat. Victoria moved behind her desk but didn't sit herself. Instead, she stood at the window, hands clasped behind her back, silhouette sharp against the dying light. "How long have you worked for Apex Capital? 6 years? Almost 7? 6 years, 9 months, and 13 days to be precise. She glanced at her watch. Your employee file is remarkably thorough. In that time you've never been late, not once. You've never called in sick. You've never missed a deadline. Your performance reviews read like love letters. 3 different department heads have tried to poach you. You've been offered 4 promotions, 2 lateral moves with significant pay increases, and 1 opportunity to join our London office at nearly double your current salary. Ezra said nothing. Victoria turned to face him. You've declined them all, every single one. Do you know what your colleagues call you? I can imagine several options. A ghost of a smile touched Victoria's lips. The monk, because you arrive at 8:30, work with laser focus, and leave at 5:30, never deviating, never socializing, never joining the happy hours or the golf outings or the networking dinners that everyone else treats as mandatory career maintenance. I wasn't aware my punctuality was a problem. It's not a problem. It's a mystery. Victoria moved around her desk, perching on its edge close enough now that Ezra could smell her perfume. Something subtle and expensive. And I don't like mysteries in my organization, Ezra. They tend to indicate either hidden ambition or hidden weakness, and I can't figure out which category you fall into. Perhaps neither. Everyone falls into a category. She crossed her arms. 3 weeks ago, I invited you to the executive dinner at Aurelio's. You declined. Last month, I personally requested your presence at the Thornhill Foundation Gala. You declined. In August, I suggested we discuss your career trajectory over dinner. You declined. Her eyes narrowed. I don't make those invitations lightly, Ezra. Do you know how many people in this building would kill for 5 minutes of my undivided attention outside this office? I'm sure the number is considerable. Then help me understand. Why do you keep saying no? The clock on her wall ticked in the silence. 5:29. Ezra's jaw worked for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but steady. With respect, Ms. Ashford, my personal time is exactly that. Personal. You're a single man with no social media presence, no emergency contacts beyond a lawyer, and apparently no interest in advancing a career you're exceptionally good at. That's not personal, Ezra. That's peculiar. I do my job well. You do your job brilliantly, which is why I'm trying to understand what's holding you back. She paused. Or who? Something flickered across Ezra's face so brief that if Victoria hadn't been watching so closely, she would have missed it. But she was watching. She was always watching. There's someone, isn't there? Someone you need to be with. Someone who comes before everything else. 5:30. Ezra stood abruptly. Ms. Ashford, I appreciate your interest in my career, but I really must go. Answer the question. No. The word hung in the air between them. Simple absolute without apology. Victoria's eyebrows rose. No, I won't answer. My personal life is not your concern, and with all due respect, you have no right to demand an explanation for how I spend my time outside these walls. I arrive on time. I do exceptional work. I meet every expectation placed on me within my job description. What I do at 5:31 is none of your business. For a long moment, Victoria simply stared at him. Around them, the office had grown quiet. That particular silence of a building emptying itself of human ambition, leaving only the hum of servers and climate control. You're right. I apologize. That was overstepping. Ezra blinked, clearly not having expected concession. However, Victoria continued, standing and moving back behind her desk. I want you to know that the offer for dinner, professional or otherwise, remains open. I don't extend opportunities twice, Ezra, but for you, I'm making an exception. Think about it over the weekend. There's nothing to think about. Ezra moved toward the door. Have a good evening, Ms. Ashford. Ezra. He paused, hand on the doorframe, but didn't turn. Whoever they are, they're very lucky to have someone so devoted. Ezra's shoulders tensed. For a heartbeat, Victoria thought he might turn around, might say something, might give her the answer she was searching for. Instead, he walked out. Victoria stood alone in her office, watching through the glass, As Ezra strode toward the elevators with the same measured pace, pressed the button, waited exactly 7 seconds, and disappeared behind the closing doors. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she rarely used. "Michael, it's Victoria Ashford. I need you to look into someone for me. Quietly." The subway car rattled through the darkness beneath the city, its fluorescent lights flickering with each lurch and sway. Ezra sat in the corner seat, messenger bag on his lap, staring at nothing in particular. Around him, the Friday evening crowd was a mix of exhausted workers and eager 20-somethings heading toward weekend freedom. A group of young women laughed over shared earbuds. A man in paint-stained coveralls dozed against the window. 2 teenagers argued about a video game with the passionate intensity only adolescents could muster. Ezra heard none of it. His mind replayed this conversation with Victoria Ashford. Her questions, her observations, her unnervingly accurate assessment of his life. She was right, of course, about all of it. The declined promotions, the refusal to socialize, the rigid schedule that allowed for no deviation. But she was also wrong. She thought there was something holding him back. In truth, there was someone holding him together. The train emerged from underground, and suddenly the city spread out below in a carpet of lights. Ezra's reflection appeared in the window, a man of 38 who looked 45, with premature silver at his temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and carefully contained grief. His phone buzzed. A text from Julian. "Drinks at Hannigan's. Last chance to prove you're human." Ezra deleted it without responding. 23 minutes later, he exited at Riverside Station and walked 4 blocks through a neighborhood that was neither prosperous nor destitute, just tired. The buildings here were old brick and faded concrete, built in an era when function mattered more than form. Bare trees lined the sidewalks, their branches dark against the purple sky. He stopped in front of a 4-story building with a small sign. Riverside Long-Term Care Facility. Taking a deep breath, Ezra pushed through the doors. The lobby was warm and smelled of industrial cleaner with undertones of institutional food. The walls were painted a soft blue that some designer had probably decided was calming. Inspirational posters hung at intervals, sunrises, mountains, generic phrases about hope and strength. "Evening, Ezra," the security guard called from his desk. George Palmer was 62, with kind eyes and a grandfatherly manner. "Right on time as always." "Evening, George." "She had a good day today. Nurse Torres said she seemed peaceful." Ezra's throat tightened. "Thank you." He signed the visitor log, a formality George didn't actually require, but Ezra performed anyway and moved toward the elevators. The building was quiet at this hour, visiting time winding down, the night shift beginning their routines. 3rd floor room 314. Ezra paused outside the door, his hand on the handle. This moment, the transition from the world outside to the world within, never got easier. Every day he had to prepare himself. Every day he had to remember how to breathe. He pushed the door open. The room was small but private, a concession Ezra had fought hard for and paid dearly to maintain. Soft evening light filtered through gauzy curtains. A single bed occupied the center of the space, surrounded by the quiet machinery of modern medicine. Monitors that beeped softly, tubes that carried fluids, rails that prevented falls that would never happen. And in the bed, tiny against the white sheets, lay Iris. She was 11 years old and weighed 73 pounds. Her dark hair, so much like her mother's, was pulled back in a simple braid that one of the nurses had done that morning. Her face was peaceful features, delicate and perfect, as if she were simply sleeping. As if at any moment her eyes would flutter open and she would smile and ask what was for dinner. But her eyes didn't open. They hadn't opened in 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days. Ezra set his bag down and pulled the chair close to her bedside, the same chair he'd sat in every evening for 1,173 consecutive days. He took her hand, careful of the IV line, and held it gently in both of his. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm here." The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. The ventilator whispered its mechanical breath. Somewhere down the hall, a television murmured. "I had an interesting day at work. My boss, Ms. Ashford, I've mentioned her before. She cornered me in her office. Wanted to know why I keep turning down her invitations." He smiled faintly. "I didn't tell her, of course. How could I explain, how could I make someone like her understand that there's nothing, no promotion, no salary, no amount of prestige that could matter more than being right here, right now with you?" Iris's chest rose and fell with the rhythm of the ventilator. Her hand lay motionless in his. Ezra reached into his bag and pulled out a worn paperback. The Secret Garden, Iris's favorite. They'd read it together 7 times before the accident. They'd started their 8th read-through on the day she'd gone to school and never come home the same. He opened to the bookmarked page and began to read, his voice steady and gentle, filling the small room with words about hidden places and growing things, and the magic that happens when you tend to something with love and patience. Outside, the city moved on. Lights blazed, traffic flowed, people laughed and argued and lived their lives in the endless rush of existence. In room 314 stood still. Ezra read until visiting hours ended at 8, then carefully marked his place and closed the book. He stood, leaned over, and pressed a kiss to Iris's forehead. "I love you, little flower. I'll see you tomorrow." He squeezed her hand one last time and froze. Had it moved? Just the smallest pressure, so faint he might have imagined it. Ezra's heart hammered. He looked down at their joined hands, then at Iris's face, searching for any sign, any flicker of consciousness. Nothing. "Iris," his voice cracked. "Sweetheart, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." The monitors beeped their unchanging rhythm. The ventilator whispered. Ezra waited, barely breathing, hope and dread warring in his chest. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Nothing. Slowly he released her hand and stepped back, running his fingers through his hair. Of course it was nothing. Just wishful thinking. Just his desperate heart playing tricks after another long day of pretending to be normal. Pretending he wasn't dying inside one evening at a time. "Good night, Iris. Daddy loves you." He walked out, closing the door softly behind him. In the parking lot of Riverside Long-Term Care Facility, sitting in a nondescript sedan 3 rows back from the entrance, a man named Michael Reeves lowered his camera and checked the timestamp on the last photo. 8:04. He scrolled through the evening's images. Ezra Hartwell entering at 6:11. Ezra signing in. Ezra disappearing into the elevator. Michael had been doing private investigation work for 20 years, mostly for lawyers and corporate clients. He'd followed cheating spouses, documented insurance fraud, and dug up dirt on executives threatening hostile takeovers. This job was different, simpler on the surface. Just find out where Ezra Hartwell goes every evening. But Michael had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts told him there was more to this story. He uploaded the photos to his encrypted cloud drive and composed a brief email to Victoria Ashford. Subject: Hartwell. Initial report. Hartwell goes directly from office to Riverside Long-Term Care Facility in the Riverside District. Arrives 6:11 p.m. daily. Duration of visit approximately 2 hours. Facility specializes in coma patients and severe neurological cases. Investigating further. Will have full report Monday. He hit send and started his car. Inside the facility, unaware he was being watched, Ezra rode the elevator down, nodded goodnight to George, and stepped out into the November cold. The city had fully embraced night now. Streetlights cast orange pools on empty sidewalks. Somewhere in the distance a siren wailed. The wind carried the smell of rain. Ezra pulled his coat tighter and began the walk to the subway, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. Behind him, room 314's lights dimmed automatically on their timer, leaving Iris in the soft glow of medical monitors. A small girl in a big bed suspended between worlds while her father walked away because visiting hours said he must. And tomorrow he would return because love said he must. And so the days passed, each one the same, each one different only in the particular shade of hope and heartbreak Ezra carried home. In her corner office, 43 floors above the city, Victoria Ashford sat in the dark. Her computer screen the only light. Michael's email appeared in her inbox. She read it twice, then sat back in her chair staring at nothing. A long-term care facility. Someone who comes before everything else. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and Victoria wasn't sure she liked the picture they were forming. She closed her laptop and stood at her window looking out at the city she'd conquered through sheer will and brilliant strategy. She'd built an empire on reading people, understanding their motivations, knowing which buttons to push and which strings to pull. But Ezra Hartwell had no buttons, no strings, just a quiet dignity and an unwavering commitment to someone she didn't yet understand. Victoria checked her watch. 8:47. Somewhere out there, Ezra was heading home to whatever small apartment a man with his salary could afford. Tomorrow he would wake up and do it all again. And the next day, and the next for what? For who she needed to know. Not because it mattered to Apex's bottom line, not because it affected Ezra's performance, but because for the first time in longer than she could remember, Victoria Ashford had encountered something she couldn't acquire, couldn't understand, couldn't control. And it was eating her alive. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to Michael Reeves. "I need everything. Medical records, family history, the whole story. Discretion absolute." The reply came within seconds. "Understood." Victoria set her phone down and returned to the window. Below, the city breathed and pulsed, a living organism of ambition and desperation. Somewhere in that vast sprawl, Ezra Hartwell was probably reading or watching television or staring at the ceiling, counting down the hours until he could return to room 314. "Who are you?" Victoria whispered to the glass. "And what are you protecting?" The city had no answers. But Monday morning, Michael Reeves would. And Victoria Ashford, who had never met a problem she couldn't solve or a mystery she couldn't unravel, would finally understand why a brilliant man had chosen to sacrifice everything for someone she'd never met. The question was, what would she do with that knowledge? In the darkness of her office, surrounded by the trophies of her success, the awards, the framed magazine covers, the expensive art chosen more for investment than aesthetics, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years: uncertainty, and beneath it something even more dangerous: respect. The weekend passed the way all weekends passed for Ezra Hartwell, in careful increments of time measured between visits to room 314. Saturday morning at 10, Saturday evening at 6, Sunday morning at 9, Sunday evening at 5. 4 visits each, lasting exactly 2 hours, the maximum the facility allowed for non-immediate family emergencies, except Iris was immediate family. She was all the family Ezra had left. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. Ezra stood at his bathroom mirror, knotting his tie with the mechanical precision of routine. The face that looked back at him was the same one that had stared from this mirror for 3 years. Hollow around the eyes, tight around the mouth, prematurely aged by a grief that had no expiration date. He arrived at Apex Capital at 8:29, signed in with the lobby security, and rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. The office was already buzzing with Monday morning energy. People clutching coffee like lifelines, swapping weekend stories, complaining about traffic with the camaraderie of shared suffering. Ezra moved through it all like a ghost, offering nods where required, brief smiles where expected, and nothing more. His desk welcomed him with its familiar emptiness. He powered up his monitors, opened his email, and began the week's work with the focus that had made him invaluable and the detachment that made him unreachable. At 9:47, his phone buzzed with an internal message from Victoria Ashford's assistant. "Ms. Ashford requests your presence in her office at 10:15. Ezra stared at the message, a cold weight settling in his stomach. Friday's confrontation had been unusual enough. A follow-up this soon felt ominous. He typed back, "Confirmed." 28 minutes later, he stood outside Victoria's office. Through the glass walls, he could see her on a phone call, pacing behind her desk with that predatory grace she brought to every negotiation. She saw him, gestured for him to enter, and pointed to a chair. Ezra sat and waited, hands folded in his lap, face carefully neutral. "I don't care what Peterson promised. The contract specifies quarterly deliverables, and we're 3 weeks past deadline. You have until Friday to remedy this, or we move to the penalty clauses. Your choice." She ended the call without waiting for a response and turned to Ezra. "Good morning, Ms. Ashford." She sat across from him, not behind her desk this time, in the matching chair that created an unsettling illusion of equality. For a long moment she simply studied him, her expression unreadable. "I owe you an apology." Ezra blinked. "I'm sorry. Friday, I overstepped." "Your personal life is precisely that, personal. I had no right to press you for information you weren't willing to share." She leaned back, crossing her legs. "I value you as an employee, Ezra, and I let my curiosity override my professionalism. It won't happen again." The apology sounded genuine. It probably was genuine. But something in Victoria's eyes, a calculation, a continued interest, made Ezra's shoulders tense. "I appreciate that, and I apologize if I was curt." The question caught me off guard. "You weren't curt. You were honest." Victoria smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I respect that. In fact, I respect you, Ezra, which is why I want to extend another offer. Purely professional this time. Ms. Ashford," she held up a hand, "hear me out. Next month we're hosting the annual Apex Summit. 3 days, top executives from our international offices, major clients, potential investors. It's the most important networking event of our year." Victoria paused, letting the weight of it settle. "I want you to present the quarterly analysis for Asia-Pacific markets." Ezra's jaw tightened. "That's traditionally a senior vice president responsibility." "It is, and you do the work better than any of our senior vice presidents. Your analysis is sharper, your projections more accurate, your presentation of complex data more accessible." She leaned forward. "This is a showcase opportunity, Ezra. The kind of visibility that opens doors, the kind of exposure that transforms careers." "I'm not interested in transforming my career." "Why not?" The question hung between them, gentle but insistent. Ezra stood. "With respect, I thought we agreed my personal reasons were my own business." "We did, and they are." Victoria remained seated, looking up at him with those sharp, assessing eyes. "But professionally speaking, I need to understand if there's anything Apex can do to support you. Flexible hours, remote work options. We're a progressive company, Ezra. If there are accommodations that would help you—" "There aren't." "Are you sure? Because if there's something in your life that requires a specific schedule, we can work around that. Other employees have managed—" "Ms. Ashford," Ezra's voice was quiet but firm, "I appreciate the offer. I truly do. But the answer is no. I will continue to do my job to the best of my ability within my current role and current hours. If that's not acceptable, I understand. But I won't be changing my parameters." For a long moment they stared at each other. An impasse reached a line drawn. Victoria stood slowly. "It's acceptable, Ezra. You're too valuable to lose over scheduling conflicts." She walked to her desk, picked up a folder, and handed it to him. "These are the Morrison files you requested last week. I believe you're presenting the preliminary findings this afternoon at 2. "Yes, ma'am." "I look forward to it." She returned to her desk, effectively dismissing him. "That's all." Ezra nodded and left the folder clutched in his hand, his heart still racing from an encounter that had felt less like a professional discussion and more like a chess match where he couldn't see all the pieces. Behind him, Victoria watched through the glass as he returned to his desk. Her phone lay on the polished surface. No text to Michael Reeves this time. She'd already made that call 3 weeks ago. Already seen the photos, the medical records, the news clippings. Already knew about Iris. Already understood the cage Ezra had built around himself, bars made of love and grief and unwavering devotion. The question now wasn't what held him here. It was whether she had any right to try and change it. The morning crawled forward with agonizing slowness. Ezra threw himself into work, losing himself in numbers and projections where everything had clear answers and predictable outcomes. The Morrison presentation was solid. He'd spent 3 weeks preparing it, double-checking every figure, anticipating every question. At 1:47 he gathered his materials and headed to Conference Room B. The presentation went flawlessly. 17 slides, 23 minutes, and a room full of impressed executives nodding at his conclusions. When he finished, even Julian Cross, who usually found something to nitpick, offered genuine praise. "Brilliant work, Hartwell. You made complex derivatives sound almost simple. That's a rare gift. Thank you. You know, if you ever want to grab lunch and talk shop, I'm always interested in picking your brain about— I appreciate it, Julian, but I don't do lunch. Julian's smile faltered. Right, of course, the mystery continues. Ezra packed his laptop, ignoring the comment, and returned to his desk. The clock read 2:31. 7 hours and 59 minutes until he could leave. 7 hours and 59 minutes until he could be where he needed to be. He opened a new spreadsheet and dove back into work, blocking out the world. Across town, in a private corner booth at the Carlisle Hotel's restaurant, Victoria Ashford sipped ice water and waited. The lunch crowd was thinning. Business people returning to their offices, tourists heading out to see the sights. The booth afforded privacy, which was why she'd chosen it. Michael Reeves arrived at 12:33, sliding into the opposite seat with the practiced ease of someone comfortable in expensive surroundings, despite not belonging to them. He was 51, gray-haired, unremarkable in every way except his eyes. Sharp, observant, missing nothing. Miss Ashford. Michael, thank you for meeting on short notice. He pulled a thin folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. Everything you asked for, though I have to say this one's heavy. Victoria's hand paused over the folder. Heavy. How? Open it. You'll see. She did. The first page was a basic dossier. Ezra Christopher Hartwell, born April 17, 1987. Education. Bachelor's degree in economics from State University. Master's in financial analysis from Whitmore College. Employment history. 3 years at Barton & Associates, nearly 7 at Apex Capital. No criminal record. No debt beyond a modest car loan paid consistently. Credit score 748. Unremarkable on the surface. Victoria turned the page. And there it was. Marriage license. Ezra Christopher Hartwell and Claire Elizabeth Whitmore. June 12, 2012. A wedding photo. Ezra, younger, smiling genuinely, his arm around a beautiful woman with dark hair and warm eyes. Birth certificate. Iris Ann Hartwell. March 3, 2014. Another photo. Ezra holding an infant, his expression radiant with new father joy. More photos. Iris as a toddler, gap-toothed and laughing. Iris on her first day of school, pink backpack almost as big as she was. Iris at a piano recital, serious and focused, small hands poised over keys. Then the news clipping dated September 23, 3 years ago. Local woman killed in multi-car accident. Claire Hartwell, 34, was pronounced dead at the scene after a 3-vehicle collision on Highway 47 Thursday afternoon. Also injured was her daughter Iris Hartwell, 8, who was transported to Mercy General Hospital in critical condition. Victoria's breath caught. She turned the page. Medical records heavily redacted, but enough was visible. Traumatic brain injury, induced coma, multiple surgeries, transferred to long-term care, prognosis uncertain, current status, persistent vegetative state. The mother died instantly. Michael's voice was quiet. The girl, she's been unconscious ever since. 3 years, 2 months, and counting. Hartwell visits her every single day, morning on weekends, evening on weekdays. Never misses. The care facility staff say he reads to her, talks to her, holds her hand for hours. Victoria closed the folder, her hands trembling slightly. The mother, Claire. Next of kin. Parents deceased. One sister lives in California. Visits maybe twice a year, according to facility staff. Claire was an only parent to Iris. Her own parents died when she was young, raised by an aunt who passed away 5 years ago. So Ezra is alone, completely. The girl is his whole world, has been since the accident. Michael leaned back. Insurance covered the initial hospital stay, but long-term care isn't cheap. Riverside is one of the better facilities, runs about $6,500 a month. Hartwell's been paying out of pocket. That's why he lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in Riverside, drives a 12-year-old Honda, wears the same 3 suits on rotation. Every penny above basic survival goes to keeping his daughter in the best care he can afford. Victoria stared at the folder. The promotions he turned down would have required longer hours travel, evening commitments, things he can't do because he has a standing appointment at 6:11 every night. Exactly. Michael's voice softened. I've been doing this job 20 years, Ms. Ashford. I've followed cheaters and adulterers and corporate spies. This guy, he's just a father who refuses to give up on his kid. That's it. That's the whole mystery. Does she respond? The daughter. No. According to the medical records I could access, there's been no change in 3 years. No improvement, no deterioration. She's just there, stable but unconscious. The doctors don't expect her to wake up. A pause. But he still goes, every day. Rain, snow doesn't matter. He's there. Why did you want to know this? Victoria didn't answer immediately. She looked down at the folder, thinking about Ezra's quiet dignity, his refusal to explain his absolute commitment to leaving at 5:30 no matter what. I thought he was hiding something. Turns out he was hiding from something. From questions like mine, from pity, from people who tell him to move on. Are you going to use this information? Use it how? Michael shrugged. You're a powerful woman, Ms. Ashford. You could make his life easier. Better insurance, salary increase, flexible hours. All things he'd refuse because he'd know you knew. Victoria opened the folder again, looking at the photo of Iris at her piano recital. So small, so serious, so alive. He doesn't want help. He wants privacy. Then why investigate? It was a fair question. Victoria closed the folder and met Michael's eyes. Because I wanted to understand what could make a man turn down everything I was offering. Money, advancement, attention from someone who could change his life. She smiled bitterly. Turns out the answer is simple. He already has something more valuable than anything I could give him. He has purpose. She pulled out her checkbook, wrote a number that made Michael's eyebrows rise, and slid it across the table. This conversation never happened. The investigation never happened. Delete everything. Ms. Ashford, everything, Michael. I mean it. This man deserves his privacy. Michael pocketed the check and stood. Already done. He paused at the edge of the booth. For what it's worth, there are worse things in this world than a man who knows what matters. After he left, Victoria sat alone in the booth, the folder open to the photo of Ezra with his infant daughter. His smile in that picture was so different from anything she'd seen on his face at work. Open, joyful, unburdened by the weight he now carried. She thought about Friday's confrontation, about this morning's job offer, about every time she'd pushed and prodded and tried to understand why Ezra Hartwell didn't want what everyone else wanted, because he already had what everyone else was searching for. And he'd lost it, and he was spending every minute of every day refusing to let go of what remained. Victoria closed the folder and signaled for the check. That evening, as Ezra sat in room 314 reading The Secret Garden to a daughter who couldn't hear him, Victoria sat in her corner office staring at nothing in particular. She thought about calling him, apologizing properly, offering help. Real help, the kind that came with no strings and no expectations. But she knew what he'd say. The same thing he'd said every time. No thank you. But no. So instead she opened her computer and began drafting a memo about the Riverside Initiative, a new corporate charity program focused on supporting families dealing with long-term medical care. Generous donations, no publicity, anonymous corporate sponsorship. She worked on it until midnight, crafting the language carefully, making sure there was no way to trace it back to any specific employee or situation. When she finished, she sat back and wondered if Ezra would ever know. Probably not, and that she decided was exactly how it should be. The next 3 weeks passed in careful silence. Ezra continued his routine. Work, Riverside, home, repeat. Victoria watched him from a distance, seeing things she'd never noticed before, the way his jaw tightened when people talked about weekend plans he'd never make, the way he checked his watch, not from boredom but from counting down, the way he existed in the office like a man underwater moving through a world that wasn't quite real. She stopped extending invitations, stopped asking questions, stopped trying to solve the puzzle of Ezra Hartwell because she'd already solved it, and the answer had humbled her more than she cared to admit. On a Thursday afternoon in early December, Julian Cross appeared at Victoria's door looking troubled. Miss Ashford, do you have a minute? Of course. What is it? Julian closed the door. It's about Hartwell. Ezra. Victoria's expression didn't change, but her pulse quickened. What about him? He's good, really good, you know that. We all know that. Julian ran a hand through his hair. 3 other firms have tried to recruit him in the past year. Headhunters are constantly calling. Jensen and Brooks offered him a senior analyst position at almost twice his current salary. And he turned it down. He turns them all down. Always the same reason. Can't commit to the hours. Julian leaned against the desk. But here's the thing. Sterling Financial is making a serious play for him. 6-figure signing bonus, flexible schedule, work from home options 3 days a week. They're throwing everything at him. When did this happen? They approached him yesterday. He's supposed to give them an answer by next week. Julian met her eyes. I think he's actually considering it. Why do you think that? Because for the first time he didn't immediately say no. He said he'd think about it. Julian shook his head. If we lose him, Ms. Ashford, it'll hurt. Not just his output, but morale. People respect Hartwell. He's proof you can be brilliant without being cutthroat. If he leaves, it sends a message that Apex doesn't value loyalty. After Julian left, Victoria sat very still, her mind racing. She could match Sterling's offer, exceed it even. Throw money and benefits at Ezra until the choice became obvious. But that wasn't what he needed. What he needed was something she couldn't give him. More time with Iris. More flexibility. More life outside these walls. The realization stung more than she expected. At 5:27 she found herself walking toward Ezra's desk, drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand. He was packing his bag, the same routine, the same mechanical precision. Ezra. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Ms. Ashford. Walk with me. They moved to the windows overlooking the city, away from listening ears. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and purple. I heard about Sterling's offer. Ezra's expression closed off. Word travels fast. Should I be worried? That depends on what you're worried about. Victoria smiled despite herself. Even now, facing a life-changing decision, Ezra couldn't quite shed his honesty. I'm worried about losing a valuable employee. I'm also worried about you making a decision based on short-term flexibility versus long-term stability. With respect, Ms. Ashford, I don't think in terms of long-term anymore. I think in terms of today, tomorrow, the day after that. Sterling is offering me something Apex can't. Time. 3 work-from-home days means I can be closer to where I need to be. It means I don't lose 6 hours a week to commuting. It means you can spend more time with her. The words were out before Victoria could stop them. Ezra froze. What? Your daughter Iris. I know, Ezra. I'm sorry, but I know. For a long moment, Ezra said nothing. The sunset painted his face in shades of gold and shadow, making him look both younger and infinitely older. How long? His voice was barely a whisper. 3 weeks. I hired an investigator. He found out where you go, why you go. I saw the medical records, the news clipping, the photos. Victoria took a breath. And then I told him to delete everything. I haven't told anyone. I won't tell anyone. Your privacy is yours, Ezra. I needed to understand. You had no right. I know. I violated your trust. I know. I should quit right now. Tonight. You should. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. But I'm asking you not to. Not because of Apex, not because of your career, but because I'm going to match Sterling's offer. Exceed it, if that's what it takes. Flexible hours, remote work, whatever you need to be there for Iris while still doing what you're brilliant at. Ezra stared at her. Why? Because 3 weeks ago I learned something about sacrifice that I'd forgotten in 20 years of climbing corporate ladders. I learned that some people measure success differently, and maybe they're measuring it right. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken things. I don't want pity. This isn't pity, it's respect. Victoria turned to face him fully. Think about it at least. Don't make a decision based on anger at me. Make it based on what's best for Iris. Ezra's jaw worked. His eyes were bright with emotion he was fighting to contain. I need to go. Of course. He walked away, bag over his shoulder, moving toward the elevator with the same measured pace. But something was different. A tension in his shoulders, a fracture in the routine. Victoria watched him go, wondering if she'd just saved his career or destroyed whatever fragile trust had existed between them. At Riverside Long-Term Care Facility, Ezra signed in with George and took the elevator to the third floor, his mind still reeling from Victoria's revelation. She knew. Someone had been watching him, investigating him, violating the privacy he'd fought so hard to maintain. He should be furious. He was furious. But underneath the anger was something else, a strange, unexpected relief. Because for 3 years he'd carried this weight alone, and now someone else knew. Someone who mattered in the world he inhabited 9 hours a day. He pushed open the door to room 314 and stopped. Nurse Elena Torres was at Iris's bedside, checking the monitors with an expression Ezra had never seen before. Excitement barely contained. Ezra, I was just about to call you. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Something's different. Torres gestured to the monitors. Her brain activity spiked about 20 minutes ago. Just for a few seconds, but it was there. The first significant change we've seen in 3 years. Ezra's bag hit the floor. What does that mean? I don't know yet, Doctor. Holloway is reviewing the data. It could be nothing, just random neural firing. But it could also be... She trailed off, unwilling to offer false hope. Could be what? The beginning of something. We don't know, Ezra. We just don't know. He moved to Iris's bedside on legs that felt like water. She looked the same. Peaceful, unchanged, suspended in that terrible stillness. But the monitor showed something different. Numbers he'd memorized, patterns he'd learned to read like a second language. And there in the data was the smallest deviation from the endless flat line of unconsciousness. Ezra took Iris's hand. Sweetheart, I'm here. If you can hear me, if you're trying to come back, I'm right here. The monitors beeped their rhythm. The ventilator whispered. And in the space between heartbeats and the gap between hope and despair, something shifted. Ezra didn't move from Iris's bedside for the next 4 hours long past, when visiting hours ended. George had come up twice to gently remind him of the time, but Torres waved him off both times with a look that said this was different. This mattered. Let him stay. Dr. Margaret Holloway arrived at 9:47, a tall woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and the kind of calm competence that came from 30 years of neurology. She studied the monitors, reviewed the printouts, and examined Iris with gentle, practiced hands, while Ezra watched every movement with the intensity of a man trying to read prophecy in tea leaves. Talk to me straight. No medical jargon, no protecting my feelings. What does this mean? Dr. Holloway pulled up a chair and sat across from him, their knees almost touching in the small space. 3 years ago, Iris suffered massive trauma to her brain, the swelling, the hemorrhaging. We did everything we could, but the damage was severe. She's been in what we call a persistent vegetative state. Brainstem function intact, which keeps her breathing and her heart beating, but no higher brain activity. No consciousness, no awareness, no response to stimuli. I know all this. But something changed tonight. This measures brainwave activity. She pointed to one of the monitors. For 3 years, Iris's patterns have been essentially flat in the areas associated with consciousness. Tonight, for approximately 14 seconds, we saw activity in her frontal cortex, theta waves similar to what we see in early sleep stages or deep meditation. Ezra's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. What does that mean? Is she waking up? I don't know. It could mean her brain is beginning to heal in ways we didn't think possible. It could mean random neural firing that signifies nothing. It could mean she's experiencing some level of awareness we can't measure yet. Dr. Holloway leaned forward. Ezra, I need you to understand something. This is one spike, one brief moment in 3 years of nothing. I cannot, I will not promise you that this is the beginning of recovery. The odds are still overwhelmingly against us. But there's a chance. There's always been a chance. It was just infinitesimally small. Now it's—" she paused, choosing her words carefully. "Now it's slightly less infinitesimally small, but it's there." Dr. Holloway's professional mask cracked slightly, revealing the human underneath. "Yes, Ezra, it's there." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and turned back to Iris. She looked exactly the same as she had that morning, that week, that year. But something fundamental had shifted in the universe. Some cosmic dial turned a fraction of a degree toward hope. What happens now? We watch, we wait, we run more tests tomorrow. EEG, functional MRI if we can arrange it. We document everything. Dr. Holloway stood. And you continue doing exactly what you've been doing. Reading to her, talking to her, being present. If there's any chance her consciousness is starting to emerge, your voice, your presence, those could be the anchors helping her find her way back. After Dr. Holloway left, Ezra sat in the dimness of room 314, holding Iris's hand, feeling the steady pulse of her heartbeat through her thin wrist. "I felt you move earlier, just the smallest squeeze. I thought I'd imagined it, but I didn't, did I? You're trying to come back to me." The monitors beeped. The ventilator whispered. The world outside continued its relentless turning. "Your mom would be so proud of you, little flower. So proud of how strong you are." Ezra's voice cracked. "I need you to keep fighting, okay? I need you to know that I'm right here, that I've been here every single day, and I'm not going anywhere. Not ever." He stayed until midnight, when Torres finally insisted he go home and sleep. "She needs you rested. If things start changing, we need you sharp, not exhausted. Go home, Ezra. We'll call if anything happens." The subway ride home felt surreal. The fluorescent lights too bright, the other passengers too loud. Ezra kept checking his phone, half expecting a call telling him to come back, that Iris had opened her eyes, that the miracle he'd prayed for every night was finally happening. The call didn't come. He reached his apartment, a one-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades, at 1247. The space was Spartan. A couch, a TV he rarely watched, a small kitchen table where he ate meals he barely tasted. The bedroom held a bed, a dresser, and an entire wall of photo albums and framed pictures. Iris at 2 covered in birthday cake. Iris at 5 missing her front teeth. Iris at 7 holding her first piano trophy. And Claire, beautiful Claire, in dozens of shots. Laughing, dancing, holding their daughter, looking at Ezra with eyes full of love and forever promises. He stood in front of that wall, touching a photo of the three of them at the beach, taken 6 months before the accident. They looked so happy, so ignorant of the devastation waiting just around the corner. She moved. She's trying to come back. Claire smiled from the frame, frozen in eternal summer, and Ezra felt the familiar ache of her absence. Duller now than it had been 3 years ago, but never fully gone. He showered, lay down, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged him under. The next morning, Ezra called in sick for the first time in nearly 7 years. He sent a brief email to his supervisor. "Family emergency. We'll update Monday." He didn't mention Victoria didn't think about Sterling's offer or Apex's counteroffer or anything beyond getting back to Riverside as fast as possible. The facility's morning routine was different from evenings. Brighter, busier, filled with physical therapists and occupational therapists and the controlled chaos of institutional care. Ezra signed in at 7:53. George greeted him with raised eyebrows but no questions. Room 314 was occupied by Dr. Holloway and 2 other specialists when Ezra arrived. They were setting up equipment for the EEG, attaching electrodes to Iris's scalp with practiced efficiency. "Morning. Any trouble getting away from work?" "No trouble." She studied him with the kind of look that said she knew exactly what sacrifice that simple answer represented. "Good. We're going to monitor her brain activity continuously for the next 72 hours. If there's another spike, we want to catch it in real time and see what might be triggering it." What could trigger it? Auditory stimulation, tactile stimulation, Temperature changes, even random neural reorganization. Or nothing at all. The brain is still largely a mystery to us, Ezra. We're mapping uncharted territory here. The testing took 3 hours. Ezra sat in the corner watching, occasionally answering questions about Iris's medical history, mostly just being present in case she needed him. At 11:15 his phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Julian said you called in sick. Everything okay?" Ezra stared at the message, torn between anger at her intrusion and gratitude for her concern. Finally he typed, "Family matter. We'll explain Monday." Her response came immediately. "Take whatever time you need. Your position is secure." He pocketed the phone without responding. By noon the specialists had finished and departed, leaving instructions for the nursing staff and promising to review the data remotely. Ezra settled into his familiar chair and pulled out the secret garden opening to their bookmarked page. "Okay, sweetheart. Where were we?" He scanned the text. "Ah, right. Mary has just discovered the hidden door." He read for 2 hours, his voice steady and calm, occasionally pausing to squeeze Iris's hand or brush hair from her forehead. Torres came and went, checking vitals, adjusting IV drips, offering Ezra coffee he accepted but barely touched. At 2:34, in the middle of a sentence about roses and robin redbreasts, the monitor's pitch changed, just slightly, just for a moment. Ezra's head snapped up. "What was that?" Torres was at the monitors instantly, her eyes scanning the readouts. "Brain activity spike. Smaller than last night, but definitely there." She grabbed her tablet, logging the time and duration. "What were you doing?" "Reading, just reading." "Keep going. Don't stop. If auditory stimulation is triggering this, we need to know." Ezra's hands trembled as he found his place again. He continued reading, his voice slightly unsteady, now his heart racing with a hope so fierce it hurt. 10 minutes later, another spike. Then nothing for 40 minutes. Then another, this time accompanied by the smallest flutter of Iris's eyelids. So brief that Ezra wasn't sure he'd seen it. "Did you see that?" Torres's voice was carefully neutral, but her eyes were bright. "I saw it. Ezra, I need to call Dr. Holloway. Keep talking to her. Read, sing, tell her about your day. Anything. Just keep your voice going." She left the room, speaking urgently into her phone, while Ezra leaned close to Iris and whispered, "That's it, baby girl. I know you can hear me. I know you're trying. Just keep fighting. Keep coming back." Dr. Holloway arrived within 30 minutes, unusually rushed, her professional calm fractured by something that looked almost like excitement. "Show me the data." Torres pulled it up on her tablet, a graph showing brain activity over the past 4 hours. The spikes were irregular, unpredictable, but undeniably there. 6 of them, 6 moments of consciousness breaking through 3 years of silence. "This is extraordinary." "Doctor," Holloway murmured, studying the patterns. "Ezra, has anything else been different today? Different routine, different topics in your reading?" "No, same book we've been reading, same chair, same—" He stopped. "Wait, I haven't been here during the day in almost 2 years. Usually I come in the evening." Dr. Holloway was thinking out loud, her mind clearly racing. Different light levels, different ambient noise, different circadian timing. Her brain might be more responsive during certain hours. "We need to test this. Can you be here tomorrow morning? Same time?" "I'll be here." "And tomorrow evening at your usual time. We'll compare the data, see if there's a pattern." Ezra nodded, barely processing the words, his entire focus on Iris's face. Was there more color in her cheeks? Or was he imagining it, desperate for any sign of change? The afternoon dissolved into evening. Ezra stayed reading until his voice grew hoarse, then just talking about work, about the weather, about memories of Claire and family dinners and piano recitals. Torres brought him soup he didn't remember eating and water he drank without tasting. At 7:45, during a story about Iris's 6th birthday party, her right index finger twitched. Ezra stopped mid-sentence, staring at their joined hands. "Iris." It happened again. A clear, unmistakable movement. "Torres." His voice cracked with emotion. "She's moving." The nurse was there instantly, checking, documenting her professional training, warring with the wonder on her face. "Iris, sweetheart, if you can hear Daddy, move your finger again." Nothing. "Please, baby. Just once more." The seconds stretched into minutes. Ezra held his breath, willing it to happen, praying to forces he'd stopped believing in 3 years ago, and then so faint he almost missed it. Iris's finger curled slightly against his palm. Torres grabbed her radio. "I need Dr. Holloway in 314, now." The next hour was a blur of activity. Doctors' tests, measurements, hushed urgent conversations just outside the door. Ezra stayed at Iris's bedside, through all of it holding her hand, whispering encouragement, his face wet with tears he didn't bother wiping away. At 9:17, Dr. Holloway pulled him aside. "Ezra, I need to manage your expectations here. What we're seeing is encouraging, very encouraging, but Iris is still in a coma. These movements, these spikes in brain activity, they don't necessarily indicate consciousness. They could be reflexive automatic responses without actual awareness behind them. But they could indicate consciousness." Dr. Holloway hesitated, then nodded. "They could. The pattern suggests her brain is becoming more active, more responsive. Whether that translates to actual awareness to the person you knew beginning to return, we simply don't know yet. How long until we do know? Days, weeks, maybe months. Or it could happen tomorrow. Recovery from this kind of trauma doesn't follow a predictable timeline." She put a hand on his shoulder. "What I can tell you is that in 30 years of neurology, I've seen 3 patients recover from vegetative states this prolonged, 3 out of hundreds. The odds are still against us, Ezra, but for the first time since Iris arrived here, I'm allowing myself to hope." Ezra couldn't speak. He could only knot his throat too tight for words. "Go home. Rest. Come back in the morning. If anything changes tonight, we'll call immediately." He didn't want to leave. Every instinct screamed at him to stay, to be there in case Iris opened her eyes, in case she called for him, in case the miracle he'd waited 3 years for finally happened. But Dr. Holloway was right. If Iris was coming back, she'd need him strong, not exhausted, and running on fumes. At 9:45, Ezra kissed his daughter's forehead and whispered, "I love you. I'll be back in the morning. Keep fighting, little flower." The subway ride home was a disorienting mix of euphoria and terror. Hope was a dangerous thing. He'd learned that over the past 3 years. Hope could sustain you, but it could also destroy you when it was ripped away. He checked his phone and found 7 missed calls and a dozen texts. 3 from Julian asking if everything was okay, 2 from his supervisor concerned about the sudden absence, and 2 from Victoria. The first text was from early afternoon. "If you need anything, time off, resources, anything, just ask." The second was from an hour ago. "I know I have no right to ask, but is Iris okay?" Ezra stared at that message. She'd used Iris's name. She knew. And instead of anger, he felt only a strange kind of relief. He typed back, "She's showing signs. First time in 3 years. Doctors are cautiously optimistic." The response came while he was still holding the phone. "Thank God. Take all the time you need. I mean it." Then, after a pause, another message. "I'm sorry for invading your privacy, but I'm grateful I know, because it means I can do this. Effective immediately, you have unlimited paid leave for family medical reasons. When you come back, we'll discuss permanent accommodations. Your job will be waiting." Ezra read it 3 times, not quite believing what he was seeing. "Why?" Victoria's response took longer this time. "Because 3 weeks ago I asked what could be more important than career advancement. You didn't answer, but now I know. And you were right." He didn't respond. Couldn't respond. He just sat on the subway, tears streaming down his face, while strangers politely pretended not to notice. At home, he stood in front of the wall of photographs again, looking at Claire's smile, at Iris's gap-toothed grin, at the family they'd been before the universe had torn them apart. She moved. Our baby moved. She's trying to come back. He fell asleep on the couch, still in his clothes, his phone clutched in his hand in case the hospital called. The call came at 3:47 in the morning. Ezra was awake before the second ring. "Ezra, it's Dr. Holloway. You need to come to the hospital now." His heart stopped. "Is she—" "She's stable, but she's showing significant activity. REM patterns, increased heart rate, muscle movement. Ezra, I think she might be transitioning out of the coma." He was moving before she finished the sentence, grabbing his keys, his wallet, his coat. "I'm on my way." "There's something else." Dr. Holloway's voice changed, became softer. "About 20 minutes ago she vocalized. Just a sound, not words. But Ezra, she made a sound. Her vocal cords engaged. That hasn't happened in 3 years." The phone slipped from Ezra's hand. He caught it, fumbling, his whole body shaking. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. He ran the 4 blocks to where his old Honda was parked, drove through empty pre-dawn streets with a recklessness born of desperation, parked illegally outside Riverside, and sprinted through the lobby past a startled night security guard. The elevator took eternities. The hallway stretched like a nightmare corridor, room 314, impossibly far away. And then he was there. The room was full of people. Dr. Holloway, 2 nurses, a respiratory therapist, all clustered around Iris's bed with equipment and clipboards, and the controlled urgency of medical professionals witnessing something rare. They parted as Ezra entered. Iris lay in the bed, still connected to her monitors, still breathing with the ventilator's assistance. But something was different. Her face held tension that hadn't been there before. Muscles engaged, expression shifting subtly, eyelids moving beneath closed lids in the rapid dance of REM sleep. She looked less like a porcelain doll and more like a sleeping child. "Talk to her." Dr. Holloway's voice was quiet. "We need to see how she responds." Ezra moved to the bedside on legs that barely held him. He took Iris's hand, feeling warmth, feeling tension, feeling life in a way he hadn't felt in 3 years. "Iris, it's Daddy. I'm here, baby. I'm right here." On the monitor, her brain activity spiked. Sharp, clear, undeniable. "I know you're trying to wake up. I know you're fighting your way back. You're the bravest person I've ever known, little flower. So brave. And I need you to keep going. Keep trying. Come back to me." Iris's eyelids fluttered. The room went silent except for the machines. "That's it, sweetheart. Open your eyes. Let me see those beautiful eyes." Her face scrunched the expression achingly familiar. The same face she'd made as a baby, fighting sleep as a toddler, resisting bedtime, as a little girl trying to stay awake for one more story. And then, so slowly, it seemed to take forever, and no time at all. Iris's eyes opened. They were unfocused, confused, the pupils contracting in the room's dim light. But they were open. After 3 years, 2 months, and 18 days of darkness, Iris Hartwell's eyes were open. "Iris." Ezra's voice was barely a whisper. Her gaze drifted, not fixing on anything, not quite seeing, but then slowly, incrementally, her eyes tracked toward the sound of his voice and found his face. For one perfect, crystalline moment, father and daughter looked at each other across the vast chasm of lost time. Then Iris's eyes fluttered closed again, her face relaxing back into sleep. "No, no, no," Ezra begged. "Stay with me. Please stay with me." "Ezra." "Doctor." Holloway's hand on his shoulder, firm but gentle. "Let her rest. That took enormous effort. Her brain needs to process, to recover." But she was awake. She saw you, and that means everything just changed. The sun rose over the city while Ezra sat beside his daughter, holding her hand, watching her sleep. Real sleep this time. Not the awful stillness of coma, but the natural rest of exhaustion. Nurses came and went. Doctor. Holloway made calls to specialists, to therapists, to people who needed to know that the impossible had just become possible. Someone brought Ezra coffee. Someone else brought food he couldn't eat. None of it mattered. All that mattered was the small hand in his warm and alive and occasionally twitching as Iris's brain navigated whatever dreams were finally returning after 3 years of nothing. At 7:23, Ezra's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Any news?" His fingers trembled as he typed. She opened her eyes. Just for a moment, but she saw me. "She's coming back." The response was immediate. "I'm coming to the hospital." "You don't need to do that." "I know, but I'm coming anyway." Ezra didn't have the energy to argue. He set the phone down and returned his attention to Iris, memorizing the new details. The way her chest rose and fell more naturally, the slight color in her cheeks, the tiny movements of her face as sleep took her deeper. "Welcome back, little flower. We have so much catching up to do." Outside, the city woke to another ordinary Friday. Traffic-built coffee shops filled, people rushed to jobs and obligations and all the things that seemed so urgent until you spent 3 years watching someone you love hover between existence and absence. Ezra understood in a way he hadn't before exactly what mattered and what didn't. And for the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself to believe that the future might hold something more than endless waiting. Victoria Ashford arrived at Riverside Long-Term Care Facility at 8:42, carrying 2 cups of coffee and looking distinctly out of place in her tailored suit among the worn furniture and faded walls. George at the security desk did a double take at the sight of her. People who wore $1,000 shoes didn't typically visit this building. "I'm here to see Ezra Hartwell. He's with his daughter Iris, room 314. George checked his log, then his face softened with recognition. "You're the first visitor Ezra's had besides his sister-in-law in 3 years. He's still up there. Take the elevator to 3, turn right." Victoria found room 314 by following the sound of quiet activity. Medical staff moving with purpose, equipment being wheeled into place, the controlled urgency of professionals responding to something extraordinary. She stopped in the doorway. Ezra sat in a chair pulled close to the hospital bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, unshaven, exhausted, and more alive than Victoria had ever seen him. He was talking softly to the small girl in the bed, a child who looked impossibly fragile, surrounded by tubes and monitors, but whose face held an expression Victoria recognized from the photos in Michael's report. Peaceful sleep rather than unconscious absence. "I brought coffee." Ezra's head turned, surprise flickering across his face. "Ms. Ashford, you didn't have to come." "I know." She stepped into the room, offering him one of the cups. "But when someone you respect tells you their child just woke up after 3 years, you show up. That's what decent people do." He accepted the coffee with hands that trembled slightly. "Thank you." Victoria looked at Iris, really looked at her, seeing not the medical case from a file, but the living, breathing reason Ezra Hartwell had rebuilt his entire life around a single principle: be there. "She's beautiful," Ezra's voice caught. "She is. She looks like her mother." They stood in silence for a moment, watching Iris sleep. Outside, morning traffic hummed. Inside, the monitors beeped their steady reassurance that life continued, that hearts beat, that impossible things sometimes happened. "How long can you stay away from work?" Victoria asked. "I don't know. As long as she needs me." Ezra rubbed his face. "I haven't even thought about Sterling's offer or your counteroffer or any of it. Right now, none of that exists." "Good. It shouldn't." Victoria pulled up another chair and sat an incongruous sight in her executive attire beside a hospital bed. "I meant what I said in my text. Take all the time you need. When you're ready to come back, if you're ready to come back, we'll make whatever arrangements necessary." "Why are you doing this?" The question hung in the air between them, direct and honest in the way Ezra's questions always were. Victoria considered her answer carefully. 3 weeks ago, I thought I understood what drive looked like, what dedication meant, what it took to be successful." She gestured around the small room. "Then I learned about this, about you spending every evening for 3 years sitting beside your daughter, reading to her, talking to her, refusing to give up even when every medical professional told you there was no hope." She met his eyes. "You've been succeeding at something far more important than anything that happens at Apex, Ezra. I was just too blind to see it." "I'm not special. I'm just a father." "No, you're a father who kept showing up. Do you know how rare that is? How many people in your situation would have eventually moved on, told themselves they'd done enough, convinced themselves that an hour a week was sufficient? Victoria's voice was fierce. "You never missed a day. Not one. That's not just love, Ezra. That's devotion most people can't even comprehend." Before Ezra could respond, Doctor Holloway entered, her energy crackling with barely contained excitement. "Ezra, she's been showing increased activity for the past 20 minutes. Brain patterns indicate she might be approaching another waking period." She noticed Victoria and paused. "I'm sorry. Visiting hours are limited to immediate family." "She's fine. This is Victoria Ashford, my employer. She knows about Iris." Dr. Holloway's expression shifted, assessing. "The one who gave you unlimited leave." "That's me." "Then you can stay, but quietly." She turned back to Ezra. "I want to try something. When she wakes, if she wakes, I want you to ask her simple questions. Her name, if she knows who you are. Basic orientation questions. We need to assess her cognitive function, see how much she remembers, how much the trauma affected her mental capabilities." Ezra's face went pale. "What if she doesn't remember? What if the injury? One step at a time. Let's see what happens." "Doctor." Holloway checked the monitors. "Her REM activity is increasing. Could be any minute now." The next 17 minutes felt like 17 hours. Ezra held Iris's hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. Victoria sat quietly in the corner, feeling like an intruder, but unable to leave, drawn by something she couldn't quite name. At 9:07, Iris's eyelids began to flutter. Ezra leaned forward. "Iris, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly with obvious effort, pupils adjusting to the light. This time they focused faster, finding Ezra's face with less wandering. "Hi, baby," Ezra whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm here. Daddy's here." Iris's mouth moved. No sound came out at first, just the ghost of words, then barely audible scratchy from 3 years of disuse. "Duh." The monitor screamed as Ezra's heart rate spiked. He was wearing a visitor badge that tracked vitals, something Dr. Holloway had insisted on after he nearly passed out from stress earlier. "Yes, that's right. It's Daddy. I'm right here." Tears were streaming down his face. "Do you know who you are? Can you tell me your name?" Iris's brow furrowed with concentration. Her lips formed shapes, testing sounds. Iris." Dr. Holloway was writing frantically, documenting everything. "Good. Very good, Iris. Do you know how old you are?" Confusion crossed the girl's face. Her eyes shifted from Ezra to the doctor to the unfamiliar room. 8. Ezra's breath caught. She thought she was still 8, the age she'd been when the accident happened. "Close, sweetheart. You're 11 now. You've been asleep for a long time." "Tired," Iris whispered. "So tired." "I know. It's okay to rest. You're doing so well." Ezra kissed her forehead. "I love you so much." "Love you," Iris murmured, her eyes already drifting closed. "Don't go." "I won't. I'm staying right here." Within seconds she was asleep again, her breathing deep and even. Dr. Holloway set down her tablet, her hands shaking slightly. That was remarkable. Name recognition, self-awareness, language processing, emotional connection, all functioning. She's lost 3 years of memory, but her core cognitive abilities appear intact. She's really coming back. She is. It's going to be a long recovery. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy to strengthen her voice, psychological support to help her process the time loss. But Ezra, Dr. Holloway's voice was thick with emotion. "Your daughter is coming back." Ezra broke down completely, his shoulders shaking with sobs he'd been holding back for 3 years. Victoria looked away, giving him what privacy she could in the small room, and found herself blinking back her own tears. Over the next 6 hours, Iris woke 3 more times. Each period of consciousness lasted longer. 2 minutes, then 5, then nearly 10. Each time she was more present, more aware though, clearly confused about where she was and why everything felt so wrong. "Where's Mommy?" she asked during the 4th waking, her voice still weak but gaining strength. Ezra's face crumpled. This was the conversation he'd been dreading, the truth he'd have to tell her eventually. Sweetheart, do you remember the car ride the day you and Mommy were coming to pick me up from work? Iris's expression went distant searching. There was a red light and then... Fear crept into her eyes. There was a noise, a big noise, and then I don't remember. There was an accident, a bad one. Ezra took both her hands in his. Mommy didn't make it, baby. She died in the accident. I'm so sorry. The girl's face transformed, grief and confusion and loss all crashing together. No, that's not. Mommy was just... We were just... I know. To you it feels like yesterday. But it's been 3 years. You got hurt very badly. You've been in the hospital all this time asleep while your body healed. Iris started crying, the sound heartbreaking from someone so small and fragile. Ezra gathered her carefully against his chest, mindful of the tubes and wires, and let her sob out her grief for a mother she'd lost yesterday that everyone else had been mourning for years. Victoria slipped out of the room, unable to watch any more without breaking down herself. She found an empty waiting area and sat heavily, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. She'd built an empire on rational decisions, strategic thinking, emotional detachment. She'd prided herself on never letting feelings interfere with business, on making the hard choices that success required. And here was Ezra Hartwell, who'd sacrificed every opportunity for advancement, who'd lived in poverty to afford his daughter's care, who'd spent 3 years reading to someone who couldn't hear him. And he'd been right. He'd been right about everything. Ms. Ashford. Victoria looked up to find Nurse Torres standing there with a box of tissues. Thought you might need these. It's a lot to process even for visitors. How does he do it? How did he stay hopeful for 3 years when everyone said there was no chance? Torres sat beside her. He didn't stay hopeful, not always. I've seen him in the depths of despair ready to give up. But every time he'd come back the next day anyway. Hope or no hope, he showed up. That's love, Ms. Ashford. Real love doesn't need hope. It just needs commitment. Victoria wiped her eyes. Mascara probably ruined beyond repair and didn't care. I offered him promotions, salary increases, networking opportunities. I thought I was offering him the world. You were offering him your world, but he's been living in a different one. Doesn't make either wrong, just different priorities. I want to help, really help, not just throw money at the problem, but I don't know how. Torres smiled. You already are. You gave him time. That's the only resource that matters right now. Everything else he'll figure out. Back in room 314, Iris had cried herself back to sleep in Ezra's arms. Dr. Holloway was conferring with the respiratory therapist about removing the ventilator. Iris's breathing had strengthened enough that she might not need it anymore. We'll try weaning her off over the next 48 hours. If she can maintain adequate oxygen levels on her own, we'll extubate. That's a huge milestone. Ezra nodded, barely processing the medical terminology, his entire focus on the small body tucked against him. She felt so fragile, so impossibly light. 3 years of muscle atrophy had left her weighing less than she had at age 8. The physical recovery will be extensive. She'll need to relearn basic motor skills, walking fine motor control coordination. Her muscles have been unused for 3 years. It'll be like teaching a toddler all over again. I don't care how long it takes. I know you don't. But Ezra, you need to prepare yourself for a marathon, not a sprint. Iris is going to need months, maybe years of intensive therapy. She'll be frustrated in pain, angry about everything she's lost. And you'll be the person she takes it out on because you're the safe space. I can handle it. Can you? Because from what I've seen, you've spent 3 years in survival mode. Now you'll need to transition into recovery mode, which is different. It means making hard decisions about her care, about your own well-being, about accepting help from people who want to support you. Ezra looked up at her. I've never been good at accepting help. I've noticed. But this isn't about you anymore. It's about giving Iris the best possible chance at recovery. And that means you staying healthy, rested, and emotionally stable. You can't pour from an empty cup, Ezra. Before he could respond, Victoria reappeared in the doorway. Her makeup repaired her composure, mostly restored. I need to head back to the office, but Ezra, I meant what I said. Take whatever time you need, and if there's anything at all that would make this easier, you tell me. You've already done more than enough. I haven't done anything yet." Victoria pulled a business card from her purse and wrote on the back, "This is my personal cell phone, not my assistant, not my office line, my actual phone. If you need something at 3 in the morning, you call. If Iris needs something, you call. If you just need to talk to someone who understands that work isn't the center of the universe, you call." Ezra took the card, staring at the number. "Why are you doing all this? Really?" Victoria looked at Iris sleeping in his arms, at the bare room with its medical equipment and institutional walls, at the man who'd given up everything for this moment. "Because someone should have been in your corner 3 years ago and no one was. Because I have the power to make your life easier, and I've been using it to make it harder. And because—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Because watching you fight for your daughter has reminded me what integrity actually looks like. I want to be the kind of person who supports that, not someone who tries to exploit it for corporate gain." Ezra's eyes glistened. "Thank you. For understanding. For this. For everything. Don't thank me yet. I'm still figuring out how to be a decent human being instead of just a successful executive. It's a work in progress." After she left, Ezra sat with Iris for another 2 hours, just holding her, feeling her breathe, marveling at the miracle of her presence. Around him, the hospital continued its routines. Meals delivered, medications administered, visiting hours enforced and then relaxed when Dr. Holloway explained the special circumstances. At 3:15, Iris woke again. This time her eyes were clearer, more focused. "Daddy, I'm here, little flower. I'm really 11. You really are." She was quiet for a long moment, processing. "Did I miss my 9th birthday? And my 10th? Ezra's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart. But we can celebrate them now. All together if you want. Make up for lost time. What grade should I be in?" "6th grade. But don't worry about school right now. You'll catch up when you're ready." Iris looked around the room with more awareness. "How long do I have to stay here?" "I don't know yet. The doctors say you're doing great, but you need to get stronger. Learn to walk again. Use your hands again. Your body forgot how to do a lot of things while you were asleep." Fear flickered across her face. "Will I be able to play piano again?" Ezra thought about the piano gathering dust in storage sold to help pay for her care in the first year. He thought about the recital she'd missed, the music lessons that had ended the childhood stolen by trauma. Yes, it might take time, but yes, you can do anything you set your mind to. You're the strongest person I know. I don't feel strong. I feel weak and tired, and everything hurts. That's because you've been asleep for 3 years. Your muscles need to remember how to work. But they will. I promise. And I'll be right here helping you every step of the way." Iris reached up with obvious effort and touched his face. "You look tired too, Daddy." "I'm okay. I'm better than okay. You're awake. You're talking to me. That's all I need. I love you. I love you too, little flower. More than you'll ever know." She drifted off again, her small hand still touching his cheek, and Ezra finally allowed himself to believe that the nightmare was ending, that they were moving towards something better, that 3 years of faithful waiting had not been in vain. The weekend passed in a blur of medical tests, brief periods of consciousness and long stretches where Ezra simply sat and watched his daughter sleep. Real sleep. Dr. Holloway reduced the ventilator settings gradually, and by Sunday evening, Iris was breathing entirely on her own. The tube was removed Monday morning, and hearing her speak without the mechanical rasp was like hearing music after years of silence. "My throat hurts." "I know. That's from the breathing tube. It'll get better." Ezra offered her ice chips. "Small sips okay?" She took them carefully, wincing at the cold. "Can I have my stuffed bunny, Mr. Whiskers?" Ezra's heart broke a little. Mr. Whiskers was packed away in storage along with most of Iris's childhood belongings. Things he couldn't bear to look at but couldn't bring himself to discard. "I'll bring him tomorrow. And some of your books. Would you like that?" "Yes." And can you keep reading The Secret Garden? I want to know what happens to Mary and the robin." Iris looked confused. "You've been reading it to me. I heard you, lots of times." Ezra and Doctor Holloway exchanged glances. "Iris, what do you remember about being asleep?" The girl's brow furrowed. "It's fuzzy, like dreams, but not really. Sometimes I heard Daddy's voice. Sometimes I heard music, but I couldn't move or talk or wake up. I tried so hard to wake up, but I couldn't. I was stuck and I couldn't get out." Tears welled in her eyes. "You heard me telling you to fight. Every day you told me not to give up." Iris buried her face against Ezra's chest. "So I didn't." Doctor Holloway stepped out to compose herself, leaving father and daughter alone in their reunion. Over the next week, Iris's progress accelerated. She stayed awake for longer periods, her conversations becoming more coherent, her memory slowly filling in gaps. Physical therapists began working with her, starting with simple exercises. Lifting her arms, bending her knees, gripping objects. Everything was exhausting. Everything hurt. But Iris approached it with a determination that reminded Ezra achingly of Claire. "5 more reps. You're doing great." "I can't." Iris gasped, her arm trembling from the effort of lifting a 1-pound weight. "It's too heavy." "You can. Remember what your dad said. You're the strongest person he knows." Iris gritted her teeth and completed the repetitions, then collapsed back against her pillows, exhausted and triumphant. "That's my girl." Ezra squeezed her hand. "When can I go home?" The question hung in the air. Ezra looked to Dr. Holloway, who'd been watching the therapy session. In the hallway away from Iris's hearing, Dr. Holloway laid out the reality. "She's making excellent progress, but she's months away from being discharged. She'll need intensive inpatient rehabilitation. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy to strengthen her voice, psychological counseling to process the trauma. We're looking at minimum 3 months here, possibly 6 before she's ready for outpatient care. Whatever it takes. The costs, I'll figure it out. I always do." "Ezra, there's something else. Your employer, Ms. Ashford, she contacted me." Ezra's stomach dropped. "About what?" "She wanted to know if there were any medical resources that might benefit Iris. Better equipment, specialist consultations, experimental therapies. She was very careful to say this wasn't charity. She called it a medical assistance program through Apex Capital." Dr. Holloway handed him a folder. "She's offering to cover the full cost of Iris's rehabilitation, everything not covered by insurance, plus access to the best specialists in the country." Ezra opened the folder. The numbers inside made his head spin. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in proposed treatment. Top physicians, cutting-edge therapy techniques. "I can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because it's too much. I can't possibly repay." "She doesn't want repayment. She wants Iris to have the best possible chance at full recovery." Dr. Holloway's voice was firm. "Ezra, I've watched you sacrifice everything for 3 years. Let someone help. Not for you. For Iris." Ezra looked through the glass partition at his daughter, struggling with exercises that should have been simple fighting to reclaim what trauma had stolen. He thought about his pride, about his independence, about all the reasons he'd refused help for so long. And then he thought about Iris playing piano again, running again, living the childhood she deserved. Okay. That evening he called Victoria's personal number for the first time. She answered on the second ring. "Ezra, how is she?" "She's amazing. Tough as nails, determined to walk within a month even though the therapists say it'll take 3. He paused. "Doctor, Holloway told me about your offer." "It's not an offer. It's already arranged. The program is active as of today." "Victoria, I don't... Why are you doing this?" "Because I can. Because it's right. And because sometimes the best use of wealth isn't building empires, it's rebuilding lives." She paused. "Also because you turned down every promotion I offered, and I need to do something useful with that unspent salary budget." Despite everything, Ezra laughed, a real laugh. "The first in years." "Thank you. I mean it. Thank you." "You're welcome. Now go be with your daughter. That's where you belong." He hung up and returned to room 314 where Iris was coloring in a book one of the nurses had brought. Her movement was slow and shaky but determined. "Look, Daddy, I'm getting better already." She held up a lopsided rainbow. "You are little flower, you really are." And for the first time since a phone call 3 years ago had shattered his world, Ezra Hartwell allowed himself to believe in happy endings again.